Welcome to the Scopos Podcast. Listen as Dr. Brett Larson invites guests to chat about life in today's culture from a biblical lens. Whether it's about his passion for the outdoors or more serious social and cultural topics, Scopos always puts the focus back on Christ and his Word. Here's Brett.
Welcome to the Scopos Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. We've had some great podcasts early on in the start of this, and I'm just so excited as to what the Lord could do through this. I've had some great feedback, and we look to continue it. Interesting guest today, Dr. Wayne Lewis. He's the president of Houghton University, and Houghton is a school, if you're not familiar, it's a school in Western New York, WDCX radio, where this is recorded at and where I'm the general manager, is in Buffalo, and Houghton is nearby, about an hour and a half from Buffalo, something like that, in the beautiful hill country of the southern tier of Western New York. And Dr. Lewis is the president of Houghton. And how long have you been the president?
This is my fourth year.
Your fourth year as president of Houghton University.
Yes.
Which that changed a couple of years ago as well, right?
About 2.5 years ago.
Great. So it's now Houghton University. I grew up knowing it as Houghton College. And very well respected higher education facility in Western New York. And so today we're going to get into some really cool stuff. If you're a parent, you're going to want to stick around. If you're somebody who is concerned with higher education and where it's gone or where it could go and Christian education, we're going to get into all those topics today as we move on with Scopos. But before we start, I like to get to know the person. So Dr. Lewis, I want you to take us back to, I believe, New Orleans.
Yes.
Did I say it right?
Yeah. There's a variation.
New Orleans. New Orleans or New Orleans?
There's variation even within my family.
Oh, no. This sounds like controversy.
Yeah.
So can you take us back to you growing up in New Orleans, what that looked like, your family situation, and how you got to be the president of a well-known Christian college?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me first.
Absolutely.
I've been looking forward to getting to sit down and talk with you.
Yes.
So New Orleans is my home.
Mm-hmm.
Born and raised. Born to Wayne and Maria, first child. And I have a younger sister, Jamie, who's about 9 years younger than me, who I'm exceptionally proud of and still really, really close to. So I was a Catholic school kid. Went to Catholic schools, actually K through college.
Wow.
Yep.
Did you get slapped on the wrist by the nun? Like, do you have those stories, or are you too young for that?
No. Rulers, yardsticks, meter sticks. If you were really, really disrespectful, you got the iron ruler from the principal.
The what?
The iron ruler in elementary school.
Is that what I think? Is that what it sounds like?
Yeah.
It was a steel ruler?
It was a steel ruler. And in high school, it was paddling, though. I went to all boys high school.
In a high school, they paddled?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So was little Wayne down
the good old days.
Oh, my goodness.
This was high school, so you paddled in the front of the classroom.
What?
It was a thing.
Wow. That's humiliating. It's humiliating. I guess it's effective. Wow.
Yeah. We didn't think about it that way back then. I mean, sometimes, you'd get the option of being paddled or having detention. You'd much rather get paddled.
Yeah, it's over.
Yeah, it's
you don't
done.
have to stay after.
It's done.
And if it's like a small teacher, like, little Mrs. Jones in English class.
The teacher did matter.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The teacher did matter. So I was a Catholic school kid, finished high school, went to college, did my undergraduate degree in New Orleans. I'm a Loyola University graduate, Loyola University, New Orleans.
Yep.
Started school initially as a music major. I was a jazz studies major.
Really?
Yeah, I was a saxophonist from the time I was 7. Started playing saxophone.
I would love to hear that.
Yeah,
the saxophone is
I'm
so cool. Smooth
well
jazz?
Retired.
Oh, you don't play anymore?
No. I ended up changing my major about a year and a half in. So in my sophomore year, about the same time, I had started working while I was in college for the Orleans Parish Criminal Sheriff's Office, and planned to continue a career in law enforcement. Is what I intended to do. So my undergraduate degree is in criminal justice. I was working for the sheriff's office, had every intention on...
So were you a deputy?
I was.
Yeah.
Orleans Parish Criminal Sheriff's Office. And went to graduate school really only because of a major professor in my undergraduate program. He had a remarkable life and career story. He was a GED to PhD story. At the time, he was deputy chief of police as well in the city of New Orleans. Eventually, he'd become a police chief in Washington State and Tennessee, and then come back and be the chief in New Orleans. But he was the one who encouraged me to go to graduate school first. He said, you can come back, you can pick up right where you left off, but I really think you need to go to graduate school first. So he saw something in me, saw potential in me, and I think I believed in what he saw in me so much that I said, okay. And I went to graduate school and did a degree in what he did his graduate degree in, because that's what he did.
Wow.
Yeah.
That tells you the importance of not really mentorship, but just encouragement.
It's
really,
huge.
Of somebody
It's
coming
huge.
behind you.
It was an incredibly formative experience in my life, not only for my own education and development, but it's one of several really impactful experiences that has shaped the way I work with young people and the way I serve as an educator. That just what you said, how important it is to say to young people what you are able to see in them, to tell them the potential you see in them, to encourage them to go forward, because sometimes they can't see it yet. And they're waiting on us to share that with them.
That's good.
So I went, did my master's degree. First semester in my master's degree changed my life, broadened my horizons, made me see and consider possibilities that I could have never imagined before. And I made up my mind in my first semester of my master's degree that I was going to get a PhD. And eventually I wanted to become a professor.
Wow.
I knew that. It wasn't a straight line path for me. So I finished my master's degree, met my wife while I was in Ohio. I did my master's at the University of Akron. And we got married, moved back down to New Orleans, my home, and both started careers as public school teachers. And so she was teaching right outside of the city in Jefferson Parish Public Schools. I was teaching in the city in New Orleans Public Schools. Eventually, I would move right outside to St. Charles Parish Public Schools. And we were teaching in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit the city.
Wow.
Yeah. So we lost our home in Hurricane Katrina, 13 feet of water in our home. So we'd been married at that point just a couple years, had bought our first home a couple months before, and came back, lived in a fire station for about a month while we applied for jobs, and both got calls the same day from the same school district, Wake County Public Schools in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Wow.
So we moved to Raleigh, both took jobs.
The Lord is so good. You both got calls the same day from the same district.
There's no way it was anything but God.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a coincidence. I don't believe in that. So we moved to Raleigh. Everything we owned, we could put in a Walmart bag. Completely started over. How
was your kind of like mood at this point, or the spirit with you being newly married and this thing? I mean, did it bring you together? Did it cause strife?
It was the strangest thing. There was never any question for us that God was going to provide.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as difficult as the situation was, and you know, stressful and uncomfortable. I mean, you just can't imagine. You know, I think back now to just that period of life and time and what it was like. Like it's unbelievable. But if anything, I think it increased our faith as young people, as young married people, and was formative for the rest of, you know, for us going forward in our marriage. We've been married 21 years. In a couple years. So that was in a couple months, so a couple weeks. So that was pretty early on for us. But I think it did help to shape what our relationship and our life would look like going forward.
You know, Katrina's funny because it's kind of one of the at least for our generation, one of the first hurricane disasters that we can all remember and look back. It's kind of like the start of that kind of season where and the response levels of things and we just had a couple go through Helene, Milton, and these things happen and I look back to Katrina as like my first kind of awareness of the magnitude of destruction and things that can happen.
Well, it was relatively early during our 24-hour news cycle, right?
I think that's what it is.
And so much of it was televised. You could turn on, your favorite news station any time of the day. And
it's the first one where we saw a guy out there like in his rain suit, barely hanging on, trying to report, and you're going, "What are you doing out here, dude?"
Yeah,
like those. Then now that's the norm.
I think that's part of it. I mean, I remember we evacuated to Austin initially, and we were in Austin for about 2 weeks with family, and we were on Google Earth, trying to locate our house and our neighborhood to try to see,
is it there?
Where the water? Where is it there? What the water level is? Is the water receding? It's funny. Almost 20 years ago now, but seems like it wasn't that long ago.
Man, I did not know that about that. Is really a fascinating story. So you're teaching public school.
So we're teaching public school. We're in Raleigh now. We're restarting life.
Love Raleigh, beautiful area.
It is. We loved our time in North Carolina. Yeah. I went back to graduate school. Yeah. So I'm teaching.
So you already have a master's degree.
I have a master's degree. Yeah,
but you wanted to go back.
Went back. PhD program at North Carolina State. Started initially teaching during the day and going to school in the evening and at night. Eventually left my, at the time, high school teaching position to do doctoral study full time, which included teaching at North Carolina State. And so doing teaching in the teacher preparation program at North Carolina State while I finished my PhD, and then was recruited right out of my PhD program to take a faculty position at the University of Kentucky. And so my full-time higher ed faculty life started at the University of Kentucky as a new assistant professor, tenure track assistant professor. Incredible experience for me. I think I'll always be a Wildcat at heart.
Hey, I was just saying, you a Wildcat fan?
I'm absolutely a
football,
Wildcat
basketball,
fan. You name it,
all of it,
every bit.
Oh, that's cool.
Every bit. Yeah. So we started life in Lexington.
You've lived in a lot of pretty areas.
We have.
Went from Raleigh to Kentucky. Yeah. I mean, Kentucky's beautiful.
I mean, Western New York.
Southern tier of Western New York.
It is.
You get all the good gigs, man.
It is. It is. So we, moved into University of Kentucky, faculty, into program administration, and then, career took probably one of the most significant turns that I could have never anticipated. Was my time in government. Had no intention of pursuing a career in government. It was another one of those situations where God opened the door, and we spent some time in prayer and discernment and trying to figure out, is this where God is leading us? And believed he was. And so spent 4 years in state government in Kentucky. One of the greatest honors of my life and career has been serving the people of the Commonwealth. And so my first 2 years as executive director of education policy and programs, where I got to work on education policy, everything from early childhood policy, all the way through higher education policy, workforce policy, integrating what we do educationally within the state with the realities of the workforce and industry, working with the Chamber of Commerce. That just incredible experience. And then my second 2 years as Commissioner of Education for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So leaving government, went back to higher education, always knew I was going back to higher education, and served at Belmont University in Nashville as Dean of the School of Education, inaugural Dean of the School of Education, for a short period of time before we got the call to consider the presidency at Houghton University. And so I had not heard of Houghton. previously. I had no experience in Western New York. We're a denominational institution. I was not at that time a member of the Wesleyan Church. I was actually a member of the United
Wesleyan
Methodist
Church isn't real huge in the South either, and you were down south.
It's not. No.
Obviously, everything's Southern Baptist or whatever.
The only reason I knew of the Wesleyan Church was because of relationships with Asbury University.
Right, which was Methodist, which is very similar related, right? Or
yeah.
Is Asbury Wesleyan or Methodist?
So they're not a denominational entity, but they are in the Wesleyan holiness tradition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And actually lots of relationships between Asbury and Houghton historically, and even continuing to today. The president at Asbury is a good friend now.
Oh, wow.
So first question was, where is it? The thing that piqued our interest initially was it's a couple hours away from where my wife grew up. My wife's from Northeast Ohio.
Oh, okay.
You're just a little over 3 hours away. So wow, that's interesting. Possibility that could be a lot closer to family. And then second was faith and theological alignment, which for us was huge. That was enough for us to open the door to start to consider the possibility. And the process went pretty quickly. The campus visit was what sold it for me.
Beautiful campus.
Yeah, and just the absolute clarity that God was calling us here for this season.
Yeah.
And that's been confirmed for us just over and over again.
The Lord steps in. You hear story after story where the Lord steps in when you don't even expect it.
You know it.
And then this is the right thing.
That's exactly what happened for us.
That is so cool. And so your first impression of Houghton was, wow, this is great. And you said you felt pretty aligned because it's a denominational school, right? And it's, I don't think it's like what I would call angry denominational. So it's not saying like this and this, and it's
that's right.
There was probably some flex there, but you weren't Wesleyan.
I was not Wesleyan, but I was a member of the United Methodist Church.
Okay, which is similarly situated.
Yeah. Wesleyan theology runs through both, and so even though a different denomination, no stranger at all to Wesleyan theology. As a denominational institution, presidents are required to be members. And so that's a condition of becoming president, is joining the Wesleyan Church, which we did, and also had the privilege of serving as an ex officio member of the General Board of the Wesleyan Church as a president of one of the institutions, and then as a delegate to the General Conference.
Now, I'm going to ask, and if you can't answer this, that's fine, but you were going into Houghton. You've made a number of changes there, which I would perceive from the outside being conservative-leaning changes. Was that something that you saw and thought, if I come, I'm going to be this way, so everybody needs to know? Or was that something where you were asked, and they came in and said, hey, we want to head this direction. Can you take us there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Because the truth is actually neither. As I interviewed for the position, new to the Wesleyan Church, no background with Houghton, what I knew of Houghton was what the search committee and the board of trustees shared with me, and what the discipline of the Wesleyan Church says, what the guidelines for the general board for Wesleyan higher education institution says. And so what I've done consistently in coming to Houghton, and this is what I intended to do, was just be who the church says we are. And that has absolutely been perceived, I think, by a lot of folks, maybe not necessarily wrongly, as a shift or a change. Because I had no background at the institution, though.
Yeah, you're saying like, hey, why aren't we this? This isn't.
I didn't realize anything I was
supposed
doing.
To be. Yeah,
I didn't realize anything I was doing or saying would be perceived as change.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is, for us, I don't think we have ever changed. I think we've always been who we are.
Yeah.
What I think is true is in this season, in the last couple years, we have been necessarily absolutely clear about who we are.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
I think.
I mean, Houghton's always had a great. I mean, I grew up in the area.
Mm-hmm.
I've known about Houghton since I was a little kid. My dad actually led the Houghton Chorale years ago.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. They actually, I asked him to lead the Houghton. He was very musical, and
Wow.
And so, I mean, I've been familiar with Houghton my whole life, and Houghton's always been well respected, and the Christian community, and
it's just the clarity.
just
I mean,
yeah. I mean, there were probably, if I'm honest, before your time, there were things that made your head tilt a little, kind of like, where are we going? What are we doing? But still trusting the longevity there and the people, and not even knowing some of them, just hearing, you hear little things, and but then, you've been, to be honest, we'll get into that more, but you've been a breath of fresh air and real just joy for me, because there aren't a lot of even Christian institutions who are being clear, as you say, about who they are and who they're supposed to be. Because the drift has happened.
I think the times require it.
Yeah.
I think there was an era in our history, there was an era in the history of Christian colleges and universities where who we were, what we stood for, what we believed in was well known, it was understood, and it didn't take nearly as much declaration and consistency with reinforcing that messaging as it does today.
Yeah, even fortitude. I mean, just we're not moving.
But this time is different.
Yeah.
And as we're in a place where institutions and people both have shifted, where Christians and Christian institutions that a couple decades ago believed one thing and operated in one way now believe something different and operate differently. For institutions like us that have not changed, we can't rest on just, well, we didn't say we were changing, and so people should just know. The times demand that you are consistent with your language, that you are consistent with your actions, that when people ask us questions, that we answer very clearly and consistently, even when that's uncomfortable. And it is uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah, I have so much to ask you. I don't even know how to articulate it all. Some of it comes, or I guess leads to the question, how do we navigate this? Because education is increasingly ungodly. It is increasingly what we would call left-leaning, to the point of where I believe it's pretty much Marxist aligned in the secular universities. I mean, it's almost an entire Marxist takeover, to where they believe education and government controls your life, the whole thing. So how do we, as Christian, the Christian church and the community, as institutions, continue to strive toward respect, excellence in the world around us, yet hold those values that they now see as antithetical to what is they consider academia or elitism? It just seems like the two ships are going further and further apart between God's word and what's Christian and true, and what academia holds high. And so how do you navigate that? I mean, how do you stay true to it yet respected?
I think it's easier to break the conversation into different parts, right? So I know we'll come back to Christian higher education, but if we start with public education, right? You're talking to somebody who believes deeply in the institution of public education. If for no other reason, for practical reasons, that the majority of our citizenry, including Christians, are going to receive their P through 12 and higher education through public institutions. So just very practically speaking, as taxpayers, right, and as New Yorkers, we do a lot of that. We're talking about institutions that are funded by all of us, that are supposed to be serving all of us. And the shifts that you're you're rightfully recognizing we can't accept as just being the new norm. Right? If we are going to continue to have a public education system, and I mean this P-12 and higher education, that we collectively fund, we collectively support, we collectively decide, this is important to us as a community, as a state, we're going to do this, then it has to return to the place where it can appropriately serve people who come from diverse backgrounds, including Christians. Christians need to be able to access public higher education, public K-12 education, in a way that does not force children and learners at the higher education level to shift their ideology, shift their core beliefs, or to pretend
right. Or they have to
that
pretend
they've
it.
shifted,
Well,
because Christian kids will tell you in public schools and in public education that that's not an uncommon thing, that they have to pretend in classrooms or with professors that they don't believe, in fact, what they believe. And for institutions that we support,
they're not going to pass the class.
That's right. For institutions that we support, that can't be acceptable. And so I think the first thing is, we have to change them.
How?
Well, we can. We absolutely can. Think about it this way, Brett. They weren't always that.
Right.
And so they were changed.
That's a good point.
They were changed from the place of being, for the most part,
but doesn't it require the church
neutral.
to actually stop being so passive about it?
Oh, there's no question. That's absolutely.
So the change has to come from within the pulpits of America.
I think it absolutely does. And I think it actually is. I don't think it's just the church, though, because for us, there's obvious, incongruence between what is being put forward at these institutions and what we believe and what we know to be true. But it's gone so far.
So far, you have to
at
pull
this
your kid.
point.
We homeschool. We had to put. We can't trust it.
I find, though, even for folks who aren't Christians, there's recognition that it's gone so
decent
far.
Folks are going, we can't do this. And so it's really, there's two aspects of, I'm speaking of lower public education, 12th and under. There's two aspects to it that concern parents. The first is the curriculum. Actually, there's three. I would say there's the curriculum, which is increasingly ungodly and even anti-American historical, right? Then it's the people teaching it who are coming out of these left-leaning universities who have agenda-driven aspects of the curriculum and highlight aspects that they want to highlight. I've seen it. And then the third is the peer influence. As our society seemingly devolves and becomes more and more ungodly, we have parents unwilling to parent their kids. And just, in practical terms, go to any high school and look what the people are wearing. It's disturbing. It's like, how do you let your kid out of the house looking like that? Just practically speaking, let alone what they're doing. The things I hear, I got sons that are teenagers who know tons of, kids. And so there's this whoa, there's so many aspects of this that we have to pull back somehow. And it just seems overwhelming, Wayne.
Yeah, but I think the curriculum is key, right? I think every one of the three areas that you identified are critically important. But every one goes back to the curriculum. And,
that's very true.
And the masterminds.
It's the core of it all.
The masterminds who determined that this was the direction and this was the agenda. This was the shift we were going to make not in public education, because the end goal was not, this is what we're going to do in public education. The end goal was, this is how we're going to change America, right? But it goes back to the curriculum, right? Because obviously the curriculum is just simply defined what we teach, right? And when I used to teach school, middle school and high school, and actually in preparing teachers as well, I would talk about what is in the explicit curriculum, meaning what is written, meaning we're teaching folks in this grade and this span to do X. There's also what is the implicit curriculum. So not only what's written, but what's implied, what's around the edges, what kind of goes around that stuff that you can't miss teaching if it's written there. And then there's also what we seldom talk about is the null curriculum, which is what we decide we will not include in
which
the
is
curriculum,
just as important as the other stuff.
which is just as important. And every one of those happens by decision. It's not happenstance. So the curriculum is incredibly important. When you think about the people, though, the people have been formed by that curriculum. So you think about, the agenda or the direction, the leaning of public school teachers in some communities. And it's not all, right?
Right.
I thank God for the positive influence of Christians and good people in public schools.
There are definitely some there.
But there are a lot of folks who are going along with this agenda, but they didn't, come out of the womb with this agenda. They have been formed and steeped in that agenda in schools.
You're going back to the very
in higher
root
education.
of it.
That's right.
It's generational.
It is at this point. And I don't think we recognized it was happening.
Or we recognized it sort of, but just wasn't, the alarm bells weren't big enough. My father taught public education for 10 years before, helping to get WDCX off the ground. And he recognized it back then. He refused to put us in public school. Eventually we did a little bit later in high school kind of years, but saw it in the 60s. And was so just frustrated by how it was just quickly going left in the 60s. So it really isn't, what I mean by generational is that whether they realized it or not, I think the devil did. I think the enemy did.
Oh, absolutely.
But he knew it was a generational slow move and played the slow game with people to get us to where now it is entirely godless.
I'm a hopeful person, right?
Yeah.
As Christian people,
I like this. This is good. This actually gives me a little hope.
So I think there's an incredibly important role to play in getting Christians who will in fact be salt and light into classrooms, but also possibly even more importantly into school and district leadership and on school boards.
Yeah.
So that's one part of what I think is critically important to making sure that public schools and public higher education institutions can return to places that can be healthy for Christian kids.
Do you think it's redeemable?
I do, but I think it's a long
road
process, just like it took a long time to get here.
See, my natural tendency is like, let's think of something different. Let's get rid of this and do privatized thing or something.
Well, I think that's a step for the immediate
vouchers,
right?
Something like.
I think in the immediate, school choice, is really important.
Yeah,
and I think people, as they recognize the influence curriculum, and just ideological indoctrination is having on kids, they have to have an out. They have to have ways that they can select schools for their kids that are high quality academic institutions and aligned with their beliefs and values.
You're right. You have to have it. Not everybody has the, we homeschool. I view it as a privilege. We're able to both academically and just with our situation, and our kids are good at it. So it works for us, but it doesn't work for everybody. It's not practical for everybody. So I never want to disparage anybody who can't do that.
Yeah.
Because I understand. But you just have to everybody has to be vigilant today. Because even in the homeschool world, my boys do all kinds of stuff with other kids. I mean, whether it's sports or anything, so they're always exposed to whatever.
Tremendous.
You can't do it for that reason. But you just have to be so vigilant as a parent today. And we need to think and this is kind of even my understanding has grown in this. Like we need to think beyond our own kids. And as you said, like think generationally, like culturally, not just like, well, I just got to get my kids through and then it's someone else's problem.
Right.
You got to think of your grandkids. You've got to think of just the kids in your church, in the community. Do it for them. Like we need to get more active. You're right. It actually, it's good exhortation. It really is.
Yeah. As we know, we spend a lot of money on schools.
A lot of tax dollars.
A lot of tax dollars
So we should
go
care
into
about
schools. They need to be places that can serve our kids.
Yeah.
Even if in the immediate we make the decision, and we're blessed to be able to make decisions where we don't have to access them.
Put our own kids in there. It still matters. We still got to care about it.
Absolutely.
That's good. That's good. Well, let's go to your experience at Houghton. You kind of got thrust on the national stage, not on purpose by any means, through some events. And there was I think there was some. I think the first one was the closing of a center there or something that closed up just for budgetary reasons or just kind of some of the decisions that have to be made, and it got blown out of proportion. And then so let's deal with each. There's three things I think that happened, okay. Right? So it was the closing of that. Then there was the LGBTQ club or something that was on campus, which surprised me that there was one, but we'll talk about that. And then the pronouns in the email thing. So let's hit each one of those. So the first one is you made a decision. Was it shortly after you got there?
The first one in order.
Okay, let's go in order.
The first one in order would be the Rainbow Alliance Cooperative that existed on campus.
So you got there and there was this club.
Yeah, there was, and I knew that this organization existed when I came to Houghton. It was relatively newly formed. It was in the spring of 2021. I arrived in June, so it had not been.
So was COVID winding down now?
It was.
So
yeah, we were still in it in New York.
Enough said. That's a whole other podcast.
It impacted our lives still in a pretty significant way.
Right.
But we were winding
And
down.
You were coming from Kentucky?
I was coming from Tennessee.
Or Tennessee. Oh,
yeah.
You were coming from Nashville.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So it was moving from. That's another story. What it was like moving in COVID from Tennessee to New York was.
You're like, oh no, what did I do?
That was an adventure. It was like going from one country to another. It was just
even in the southern tier.
Yeah.
Just because the rules were the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So in order, I learned about the club as I was transitioning to Houghton, and I understand the intention behind it was to want to say to kids who identify as LGBTQ that we love you, right? That's a Christian thing to do. Where I think the challenge became is the institution's intention for creating what was intended to be a ministry that was clear about who we were as Christians, as Wesleyan holiness people, specifically what our positions were around marriage, around sex, around gender, and providing ministry, supportive ministry space for those students. That was the intention. That did not match with the reality I found on the ground.
Yeah, that would make total sense. I mean, it's going to go a different way.
The reality of what I found on the ground. First, I mean, the name, I believe, personally, is problematic.
The name implies something different.
The
than
name
this is going to
absolutely
promote biblical
It absolutely
sexuality.
implies something different. The other thing, and this is a conversation I had with the students. I sent the students a letter and asked to meet with them. We spent a couple hours in my office the first week of school. That's how important this was to me.
Sure.
And the idea that we were absolutely clear about where we stood as an institution on these issues, that was a little squishy. What they were able to do, how they were able to represent themselves, what they were doing was inconsistent with what I was hearing was the institutions.
Were they surprised by your position?
They were. They were.
Which says that the message wasn't very clear to them.
I don't think there was clarity with them. Because what I said to them was, it was not the decision where I said, actually, I don't think this is even widely understood, even on our campus. I did not say to them in this meeting, hey, you're done. We're shutting this down. This is over. That's actually not what I said.
You wanted to give it a chance.
What I said to them was, if we can take what we have and conform this to alignment with who we are as an institution and figure out how we go forward in that way with removing any ambiguity about where we are as an institution, let's figure that out. And what they decided, this is actually documented. It's on their social. I think it's still on their social media. They said because of the administration's insistence of our alignment with their positions, we decided to disaffiliate. So that's publicly they have said they made the decision, which I support. We talked about that.
Yeah, if we can't agree, then
as being an option.
Which I can say this, it doesn't surprise me because it's agree with us or, agree all with all that we want or else.
Yeah,
it's the mantra of that agenda.
That decision, their decision, our conversation, our parting of ways between the Rainbow Alliance Cooperative and, the administration, me ended up being much more impactful for the next couple years for me than I could have ever imagined.
Can I just ask why in anything called Christian, any Christian institution, why is a decision like that shocking? The Bible's really clear. Mm-hmm. And so why I'm a little baffled sometimes. I can see why the world, by the world, I mean people who aren't in Christ, would look at something and be like, oh, that, we should expect that. Mm-hmm. What baffles me is the pushback, confusion, or whatever from those who would claim they're in Christ. Like there should be pretty much uniform understanding here, right?
Yeah, where I think it gets confusing for some people is, and I honestly believe this is from the best intentions, is people's desire to love people. Mm-hmm. And I think what it means to love someone has, for Christians especially, has gotten confused, has gotten twisted. It's almost like loving people has devolved into this idea of affirming anything,
making them feel good at the moment rather than actually what is truly good for them.
Affirming whatever
see it in
whatever
parenting.
You say. I think parenting is the closest parallel to it, and I use that comparison all the time. I love my daughter more than anything you could imagine.
To tell her she's
right?
wrong. Yeah.
Loving her does not mean I say and affirm and agree with everything she wants to do. She asks me for plenty of things that I say, baby, I love you. No.
Right? Yeah. I love you, but I'm not going to let you play with the butcher knife when you're 2 years old.
Because I love you.
It's a hard no.
Yeah.
And so, but we see a society who doesn't want to say no to any, no is because, we could go into whole postmodern ideals and all that kind of stuff where your truth is your truth, and there's no right or wrong. It's just whatever you feel is morally acceptable. It leads to all of this. So if you tell somebody no, you're affecting their reality and their truth. I mean, all that plays into that. But as Christian, we get all that. But in the Christian world, we hold to it. If you are, people claim Christ and may not be in Christ. But if you truly say, if you're bold enough to say you're in Christ, then you have to be bold enough to say his word is truth. Otherwise, you're basing it on nothing. So that is, if his word is truth, his word is clear about these things. And I guess people twist it, but
I don't know. I think we have to take quite a bit of responsibility as a church.
Yeah.
For what we're teaching, what we're preaching. And to go back to connect this to the curriculum conversation that we had, what we're not teaching and what we're not preaching, because it gets uncomfortable. Because, I think there are lots of young people, I find this especially as I'm, working in higher education and even in K-12 schools, who love Jesus and want to be Christians, but are in Christian environments or in churches where they don't hear the whole story. And it's usually out of, a decision on the part of Christian leaders to say, that stuff's a little too controversial. I'm going to leave that out.
Whether they do it even consciously. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes it's just easier to take the nice route and not rub people the wrong way, or not. I don't even often think it's like they're thinking financially in a church.
I don't think it is either.
I think that's just the path of least resistance.
It is. Yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, as a leader who has made decisions that sometimes do rub people the wrong way, like, it's not fun.
I know.
I know you do. It's not fun. Like, it's not something anybody would say. I mean, maybe somebody, but not most of us would say, "Oh yeah, I like it when people are really angry at me." I like it when I walk into a room and I'm a little twisted. I like it talking
more than most, but
I don't like it, Brett. I don't like it. But I can't, as a person who has decided, as a leader especially, to follow Jesus and to make disciple making, the central part of my walk and my work. I don't get to choose what it means to be a disciple.
Amen. That's the truth. So, okay. So you make this decision, a lot of pushback. The next thing comes along.
Yeah, I think that decision in a lot of ways framed the next couple years. Okay. It set in motion, I think, a need for us as an institution to internally and externally be clearer than we had ever been about our identity. Mm-hmm. And that can be painful, especially for students who chose an institution maybe without clarity about identity. So I talk to students on a regular basis who would say, you are making Houghton into something that's different than the Houghton I chose. Now, in reality, the Houghton they chose and the Houghton I was leading are the same institution, right? I had and have no ability, neither does any other president or board of trustees have the ability to change the positions of Houghton University.
Yeah. You're just making it more clear. They actually had a wrong understanding of what it truly is.
They had a misunderstanding of what
it's truly supposed to be.
That's exactly right. And so what they were saying to me was something I continue to have incredible empathy for, is what you're saying is not what I thought I was choosing. What you're doing is not what I thought I was choosing. And for young people, especially, who made that decision, even based on a misunderstanding, you know, I hate that. Mm-hmm. I hate that. And the easy answer is, well, if they can choose to go to another school, right? If we think about this through the lens as parents, though, that's a big decision.
That's a big decision. They got friends. They've got everything.
Right.
I understand all that. Yeah, I suppose was that a lot of kids that were like that?
It's more than a handful.
Really?
More than a handful.
Because it would seem to me, you're going to a Christian college. All of a sudden, a Christian college says, "Hey, we're kind of tightening up on some things." I would be like, as a parent, I'm of the conservative side of things, so I would be like, "Great."
There's enough variation, I think, today in what Christian college means, though.
That it could be confusing.
There's enough of a continuum that I think there's space for people to say, "Oh, you're that kind of Christian college," or "you're here."
There are universities
continuum
with Christian in their name that really are nothing like. Yeah. So I guess I could see that. Yeah. So there was another decision that I think was more budgetary than anything that was controversial.
It actually wasn't.
No,
it actually wasn't.
What was that? That was the
so
cultural
this was
center. Or
this
something
was
like
the Mosaic Multicultural Center.
Mm-hmm.
Made the decision to close the Mosaic Multicultural Center for a number of reasons. I've made plenty of budget decisions over the last couple of years. That actually was not one.
Okay.
I made the decision to close the Mosaic Center and reset the programming and what we were doing in that space, because what the center had become and the way it was operating was inconsistent with the mission of the institution.
So similar situation.
Very similar situation. Great intentions. The idea of what it was formed to do, what it was intended to do, was wonderful. In practice, what it had become, and frankly, too, the number of students and the how it was serving, who it was serving, was so limited. I mean, it was at the point where it was serving, maybe directly serving, less than 15 kids on a campus, and on a consistent basis, maybe 10.
So what was its mission?
There was some identity confusion around the mission as well. I think the administration's idea around the Multicultural Center was as a place to celebrate the various cultures that kids come to college with, right? And provide a space for learning and growth for the campus community. I don't know I know, in fact, that was not shared by all constituent groups. And some folks believed it was intended to be a space that was for a very limited number of students.
Like a DEI kind of thing.
Or even I think even more dangerous, in that a space where only certain students were welcome.
Okay.
And we don't do that.
Yeah, that's just not. That's not.
We just don't. We do not.
The opposite of what.
That's the exact opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. And so, we closed the Mosaic Center. There was no gap whatsoever, because in the decision to close it, we announced at the same time what we were doing in its place.
Yeah.
And launched what we call today our Kingdom Initiative. Yeah.
Much better name.
Which is based on Revelation 7:9, and it is a celebration of the diversity of God's people.
Yeah,
and even more so, different than what the Mosaic Center had become. We're very clear from the beginning that its purpose was to serve the entire university community, and so there's academic component to that. There's the integration of our Center for Global Humanities. There's a group of students that we use as Kingdom ambassadors who do leadership work across campus. There are a diverse set of students, because our student body is diverse. They should be representative of the entire student body. I have never believed and firmly believe today diversity work is not just about people of color.
Mm-hmm.
Like, diversity means all of us.
Yeah, it means where you come from, who you are.
Everybody is a part of the diversity of God's kingdom. Yeah. And so I'm excited about the work that's happening in the Kingdom Initiative. We are touching lots of different areas of campus. We're touching a lot of students. And there's not this divide between who this is for and who this is not for, who's welcome here, who's not welcome here. I would say that is anti-American, and even more so for us as Christian people, it's anti-Christian.
But because you made any decision in this realm, of course it got deemed as controversial.
Yes.
You can't take anything away in that world in today's culture, but I commend you for standing for the right thing. And really leading in that way. And then, so that leads us to this third decision that was probably the most public. Media picked it up. I don't think it had long legs. I think people, maybe in academic circles and, on the inside scoop and maybe in their area, looked at it. But, and it was the decision to tell certain, were they dorm parents or dorm leaders or whatever, who had decided it would be best to put their pronouns at the end of their email, which is one of the most annoying things in the world to me. When I see that, I immediately make a judgment about who the person is. They had put them on their official staff emails.
Yeah, so I'll step back even further.
Yeah.
Before we got to the media attention around any personnel decisions, you have to walk back really a year.
Okay.
Where I was made aware that there was a course being taught where students were asked at the beginning of the course to provide their preferred pronouns. To learning that, I immediately communicated to the university community, employees first, but then students immediately after, that there would be no course or any program at Houghton University where we ask students, employees, or anyone else to provide preferred pronouns.
Good for you.
We don't do that. That was an immediate decision.
Yeah.
I also communicated to the campus community that we would be working over the next couple months to develop a policy for the institution around the way we brand and identify ourselves, which included stuff like pronouns. Because the media attention has been about two individuals. At the time, I was, communicating this and talking about the policy. They were not the only two people who were using preferred pronouns in their email signatures. This has become really a pretty widespread and almost normative thing in higher education. And so I think for some of our folks, especially who were using preferred pronouns, it wasn't necessarily that they were intending to make a statement, more so that their belief was just
the pushback.
This is just what we do in higher education, and maybe had not heard, well, in Christian higher education, or in our brand of Christian higher education, that's not what we do. And so we wanted to develop a policy broad about how we communicate about who we are, and that included email signatures. And so we developed the policy. We announced that policy in the fall, and said, as a part of that policy, email signatures are to include these components. Gave an example of what it's to look like, and it may include nothing else. Not your favorite verse, not your pronouns, not a picture, Nothing. We're going to standardize it. This is it. That included, we were clear, that included pronouns. This was not something where we were shying away saying, oh, well, we're just implying that. We were clear. That solved the problem for the majority of our employees. I'm sure there were folks that had different feelings about it, but the vast majority of folks complied, have continued to comply with the policy.
Again, a little bit, to be honest with you, like coming from, I have academic degrees, same as I have 2 masters and a doctorate, so I get that world. Okay. But coming from I'm still on the outside because I'm not an instructor or employed in that world. At a Christian university, why was that shocking to anybody that you would say, we're not doing this? Like what?
It's really relatively recent though, Brett. Like it really became kind of normative.
It's just shocking to me
within the last, it's really within the last 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
So I think it was necessary for us to give clarity, even for, and
you have to.
So I'll include even these folks. I think there were folks possibly who were using preferred pronouns who didn't believe in it, but in the absence of clarity from the institution,
they're like, I guess this is what we're doing.
Yeah, and so they get the question, well, why don't you have preferred pronouns? I mean, don't you know this is normative in higher education? And if they don't hear anything from the institution, from the leadership of the institution to say, this is not what we do, then those folks are put in the position where it's just them, where it's my personal decision.
Wow.
And that's a difficult thing for, I think, for more Christians than we might recognize.
I guess. Wow.
Yeah. So we made that decision. Most folks complied. Everyone didn't. I won't get into the details of individual decisions, but
yeah,
we mean it. Like,
yeah.
We are not going to represent ourselves in that way. And I think the decision that we will not permit preferred pronouns in email signatures, in Zoom or Teams kind of email video platforms.
Yep.
It has been interpreted and put out by some as just a really unloving, inhospitable position, but it's not. No. It's not. I mean, what it is as an institution, as a Christian institution, we do not subscribe to the now widespread gender ideology that presumes that gender and sex may or may not be the same, that gender can exist on a continuum, that there are multiple untold numbers of genders. We do not believe that.
Yeah.
By including...
It's amazing to me that we have to say that, but yeah.
By including preferred pronouns in an email signature, and this is what folks who advocate for it would say, what that communicates is an openness to the 100%. Principles of gender ideology.
That's what I say. I make a judgment when I see that come across. I know who you are. That you're saying I'm more leaning to allow this,
and we want to be clear as an institution. You think about the number of people that Houghton University employees are communicating with on a daily, weekly basis. They're communicating with their students, obviously. They're communicating with parents. They're communicating with the public. They're communicating with...
Like, as a Christian parent, I wouldn't send my kid to a school where I saw that in the signature line. As a conservative Christian, Bible-believing parent.
And you would be in really good company. There are lots of parents.
So it's as much for you. Way. It's as much as a practical decision for the health of the university, and its stakeholders.
That's right.
As it was theological, which is both.
It's both.
And so you got pushback.
And the other dimension I would add as well is if you are communicating an openness to the principles of gender ideology when you're communicating with prospective students.
Right.
You're sending the message to them, even if you're not explicitly saying it, you're implying it. They get to campus and then find,
something different. You don't accept this.
This is not who you put yourself.
Which goes back to the kids you said. I came to a different Houghton than what I experienced. Right. And so it's for you. It's an effort to be honest about who you are too, right. and who your charter says you need to be.
That's what being loving is for me.
Yes,
being loving is saying
being truthful.
Yeah, this is who we are. Know that up front. We may or may not be a great fit for you. This idea that Christian colleges, to be places that reflect the love of Jesus Christ, need to be places that welcome and embrace everyone and everything is not biblical.
No, it's not.
It's not. That's a misuse, a contortion of the scriptures.
Yeah. It's a twisted use of the word like open-minded in a place of who can share ideas and thoughts. Yeah, but not those ones. Not things that are anti-God, anti-Christ, because I'm not open-minded on those things. I'm actually quite narrow-minded on those things.
No, I mean, we were talking earlier about public institutions. Public institutions have different missions.
Yes.
They have different missions. My position on
They're
public
not
institutions,
to be Christian.
That's exactly right. My position on a public institution is that it needs to be a place that is welcoming of people of various ideologies and beliefs and backgrounds. People are going to come to public institutions with every belief under the sun. And we need to be places, because we're all taxpayers, where people are treated with respect and welcome to sit down and learn and get a good education. But they cannot and should not be places that force ideologies on people.
Right. Which is what they've become.
Right.
And in a fair playing field, the Christian worldview holds up pretty well.
Amen. In
a logical environment.
That's
right. In a debate environment, I think we hold up pretty well because truth always does.
That's right.
In a court system, the truth is always the best. And it's the most freeing way.
That's right.
Do you ever notice that when you stand on the side of truth, when you stand on God's word, it's a lot less stressful because you're
always
because you're saying this isn't me. This is what God's word says. Right. This isn't my opinion, and I think there's just so much freedom there. It's what gives you that good smile. You can't see him, but Wayne's got a $1 million smile. So. I want to ask you this as we have a few minutes left here, and I want to get into this topic of, I mentioned earlier, so I have plenty of college degrees, probably too many. And
some to share.
I could just give you one if you want. And so I'm almost asking personally. That's what podcasts are. They're more interpersonal. Right. So I'm asking interpersonally. I have sons that I'm raising up, and I'm very disenfranchised with higher education. I feel at some level, perhaps even to be honest with you, in the Christian world, I feel like it's somewhat useless in today's world. The people, I hire a lot of people in different states and different places, not just here. And I have found over the years that the ones I have to most get rid of that are the most problematic are people with degrees. I hire someone. They're the most entitled. They're highly untrained and unprepared. And I think college still matters for skilled positions, maybe an accountant, a nurse or whatever, but the liberal arts thing seems to have run its course in America, and to pay that kind of money to do something like that I'm just being honest with parents around here, so help us, are starting to feel like this is, maybe I should just send my kid into the workforce instead of paying all that money, let them learn on their own and grow up. And if people hiring aren't really that concerned with it. I mean, maybe a little bit it helps, but they're kind of like, I'd rather see what you've done. How do you, as a university president now, how are you debating that battle? How are you fighting that? Like convince me that I should send my kids to college.
Yeah, so I'll give you as context before I start to answer the question. I'm probably as atypical a person as you can find who's a president of a Christian liberal arts college.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that has shaped the way I approach higher education leadership was the time I spent in workforce development.
Mm-hmm.
That has formed me and shaped me as a leader in a way that, I mean, it's just unmistakable. So keep that in mind as I respond to the question. I think the economic argument for having a college degree, when we look at the data, is pretty unmistakable. People who have college degrees, whether they're associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, they earn pretty significantly more on a lifetime basis.
Is that still true today?
It's 100%. I mean, and it's not even close. So that is there. What the data also show, though, is what you get a degree in does matter.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So I think parents and young people, as they're thinking about what the next step is, remember, I told you I'm pretty atypical.
Right. Right.
Is I think they should be thinking about what the young person wants to do, and not even necessarily what you want to do for the rest of your life. Because one of the things we understand generationally about this generation is people are going to do lots of different things.
Yeah.
The idea that you do one thing or works one place for 30, 40 years and get a gold watch it's
just gone.
That's
Yeah. I've been here.
It doesn't work that way.
I've been here 26 full time, probably 30 something. That's not normal.
It's not. So I would be thinking about what you want to do next or what you want to do first, and then think about what in higher education, what in next steps in training are most appropriate for helping you to get there. So as Houghton is, unashamedly a Christian liberal arts and sciences institution, we are not, though, a pure liberal arts institution. A pure liberal arts institution wouldn't offer any degrees, majors, programs that lead directly to professions or to the workforce.
Gotcha.
They're much more about forming the person.
Yeah.
And broader learning and discovery and understanding, and usually is preparatory for a next step, for graduate school and professional school. What we do, which is much more common for institutions today, is provide a foundation in the liberal arts and sciences that goes along with oftentimes something that is more preparatory for the workforce. So if you come to Houghton and you want to become an accountant, you're going to get that liberal arts and sciences foundation, which we think is really important because it's more than just training you specifically for what you're going to need in the job, but it's going to prepare you to be able to think, and to think and to work and to problem solve,
to research,
write,
yeah.
and to work across disciplines, right?
Yeah.
To think about how philosophy and sociology and theology interact with each other. Because in the real world, our problems don't fit into neat boxes of this is a history problem or this is a politics problem. All that stuff interacts. And so we force that interaction. I think that's really healthy for people, especially going into a workforce and a reality where the specific jobs we're going to do, especially 10, 20, 30 years from now, probably haven't even been invented yet.
Wow.
So I think there's still incredible value for that. But do I believe a 4-year degree at an institution like Houghton is for everybody? Absolutely not. I'll go even further. Do I think, this is me putting my government workforce hat on, do I think a 4-year degree at an institution like Houghton is the best fit for the majority of kids? No, I don't. I think our community and technical college system is vastly underutilized.
Yeah.
when we look at the jobs in the workforce where there are where there's the greatest need, right?
Yeah.
We categorize those in workforce development as middle skills jobs, jobs that require generally less than a 4-year degree, but some specific training, maybe an associate's degree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And these are really, really good paying jobs.
Really good paying jobs.
Really good paying jobs that employers oftentimes can't find enough people to fill them.
Yeah, I hear that all the time.
Because there's a skills mismatch, right?
Yeah.
The places where we need people in the economy and the workforce don't necessarily align.
So would you agree that we've pushed, like generationally, we've pushed way too many kids to go to college just because that's what you're supposed to do?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And the data bear that out as
and
well.
And it's actually hurt colleges because what happens is kids who aren't supposed to be there come out, and then they really weren't supposed to be there anyway, and then they said, well, that was useless.
I think it hurts kids more, kids and families more. Because here's another piece of data that most folks aren't aware of. The vast majority of kids, young people, adults who start college never finish.
And that's worse. Because you spent
then
all that money, you got nothing.
You've accumulated debt.
Yeah.
You're actually in a worse position to go pursue higher education, take on debt, earn no credential,
so
no
maybe
degree.
There's value, like if you don't know, go start working, and then maybe a year or two in, you can always go. I mean, you can go back. See, back when I was a kid, like if you were the one kid in high school that didn't go to college, like there's the loser, right? So you just went. You didn't even know why you went. You just went.
And that's still the case. I think depending on where you go to school, socioeconomic status matters a lot, right? Depending on where you go to school and what kind of the economic ecosystem of where you live is, not just that you're going immediately to college, but what college are you going to?
Yeah.
That's
so I hear your
deal.
answer is college is still super valuable. It's just got to have purpose. It's got to have the right purpose behind it.
It does.
And I think that is a great answer. And
I ask kids generally, the historic thing that you would ask when kids are thinking about college is, oh, so what do you want to major in? I don't ask that.
Interesting.
I ask, what do you think you want to do?
And then work backwards from that.
And in the Christian sense, I ask, where do you think God is leading you? Where do you think God has gifted you uniquely? How do you think God wants to use those gifts? Because if we can get a better understanding on the end game, kind of what we're working toward, then we can talk about the education that's appropriate for getting you there.
Man, that's really, I hope that's helpful to people listening, because I just interact with, parents of my kids' age. I got one in college right now, one junior and one 8th grade boys. They're going to have to raise families. They're going to have to provide income.
That's right.
in a very different world.
That's right.
Than I grew up in. And so we struggle with what advice to give them and where to go. And it's hard as a dad now, because like, I don't want you to go into debt and have that burden. I don't know where the country's going. I don't know where, where inflation's going, all this thing. I mean, it's tough today.
Yeah.
And so that's helpful advice from a university president. Big time.
An atypical
the big
one.
Cheese.
A very atypical one.
Well, you're a very good one. I wish more were atypical, Wayne. Just appreciate you and your stance for Houghton. Houghton sponsors the Scopos short feature you hear on WDCX every day, and we're so grateful.
I'm grateful for you.
Well, thank you.
For your leadership and WDCX and just the steadfast nature of what you guys are doing. You are impacting this community and our region in ways that you probably don't understand.
Well, that's true. It's hard to know. It's hard to know because we speak to them like we are now. Mm-hmm. We don't see the faces often.
Right.
We don't hear from them often until years later. But it's about faithfulness.
That's right.
And you're one of those who are faithful. So, man, I want to encourage you to keep the fight in the world of academia, which is harder and harder to do as the world comes around you. And I just respect Houghton so much. I got to tell you, I've had friends who have taken kids for campus visits and just been blown away by Houghton.
Oh, that's incredible.
And these are Christian. These are solid Christian parents who I'm always like, yeah, you got to go check out Houghton. It's a different Houghton not vastly, but it's just different than what you think. And these are kids who I'm a Liberty guy. I went to Liberty, so it's kind of like they're looking at Liberty, and I'm telling them, you look at Liberty, that's great. Liberty's a great school. Look at Houghton, too. Those are the two that I'm recommending people to go to.
We appreciate it, and I think that's great. I mean, I would never want to be in a place where Houghton's one of just a handful of Christian. We need lots of Christian colleges,
but practically we're kind of there. I know you don't want to think that.
I know,
but practically, Houghton's one of the few on my short list.
And you think about a Liberty though, and versus a Houghton.
Yeah,
the campus experiences and what you're gonna get at Liberty, the field, they're so different generally, if what you're looking for is a Liberty, you're generally not looking at a Houghton. Yep. They're just different. And
which is great.
It is great.
Because there's an alternative there.
That
there's the quaint little southern tier tucked in kind of, if you want a quaint little personalized environment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You miss 2 classes in a row, your professor might knock on your door.
Yeah. See, and like a Liberty is so big now. It's just whether you like it or not, your student ID is who you are.
Yeah.
Your number is who you are.
Whereas with us, I mean, like every person is going to be known.
That's special.
Deeply.
That's special in today's world. Houghton is a gem. And
we appreciate you.
And you are a part of making it that way and keeping it that way. It really, I just got to say, it really is a gem. If you're a parent or a grandparent or somebody, you have a Christian kid, you need to check out Houghton. It is a special place, and it's only an hour and a half away. We are blessed. I mean, all over the country, people don't have this.
Yeah.
Don't have this kind of a school and this kind of a setting so close.
Especially in the Northeast.
Well, it's actually, talk about atypical. You're an atypical president in an atypical school.
That's right.
In the Northeast, a biblically found conservative theological school in our backyard.
That's right.
What a blessing. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Dr. Wayne Lewis, Houghton University.
We hope you enjoyed the Scopos podcast, and please tell others about the show. If you have questions or want to know more, you can always email our offices at info@wdcxradio.com.